Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on your time zone, right? I'm Ellen Naylor, and I'm here with Laurie Young, and we're here to educate you on elicitation, the art of conversation. A little bit about me. I've been in business, in the CI business for 40 years, roughly 30 as my own firm and 10 with corporate types. And I was born and raised in Japan, so that has affected my life forever because I am culturally aware. I'll just say that. And I'm continuing to do more training these days than all the collection work, but I love to help other people get better at it, and that's what this is all about. Lori, on to you.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening. Thank you for joining us. My name's Laurie Young. I'm currently at a company called Lone Star Aerospace. We are consultancy. I'm doing business development, but I've never left competitive intelligence behind. I've been doing competitive intelligence for over 35 years. So Ellen and I were adding up the years and decided we probably didn't want to do that. But we're very, very excited to have you join us as we have a conversation about elicitation.
Okay, so we're going to do the old share screen thing. Open up our little presentation. Okay. Can everybody see this? Can you see
Good.
this, Lori? I just want to verify because you never know about technology, do you? Okay, so
Yeah.
moving. All right, so the very first thing I always like to start with is Peter Drucker, because his quote is pretty applicable, and it might even be a higher amount today because we have so many different ways to communicate that and with all the misinformation and all that kind of good stuff we have going on. So let's just keep him in mind.
So what we're talking about here is conversation, but elicitation is more than just conversation. It's planned conversation. The goal is to have a discussion with someone to get answers to questions that you have without maybe directly asking that question. So we're going to start with the end of how we do this.
Start with the end in mind, that's for sure. So a discussion about elicitation would be empty without our friend John Nolan's conversational hourglass. So you warm up the interview by learning about the person, right? Whatever you can find out about the person that really matters, that's going to help you get a way to connect with them immediately, right? As soon as you get on the call or you're in their face, just some one little thing, two little things. And then if you've talked to them before, techniques that worked well last time and those that didn't work well also, keep those in mind. And what's their expertise? And what do you think they know? So, and then moving down, with elicitation, you start with what John refers to as macro topics. And what that really is, just a bunch of questions you're going to ask at the beginning because people remember questions and they enjoy them and they get engaged. So you're at a trade show, and how about so-and-so, this competitor, and how's your show going? Ooh, breakfast is awful here. You know, those kind of things. And or maybe something about a sports team. Then you work into the elicitation techniques that you've decided you're probably going to use before going in, such as flattery or something you have in common, you know, or some information you might exchange. And you've kind of thought about ahead of time. Or sometimes you do it kind of on the fly because you're at a trade show. Um, and your style, back to the other side, is innocuous and non-threatening. And what we mean by that is you're a friendly face, right? Um, and you're combining elicitation techniques and paying attention. Really, the key to being good at elicitation and really good in conversation at all is observation. How does their expression change? How does their word change? How does their breathing change? Are they getting nervous? Or are they just wide open? Oh, you got them now. You know, just really, really having all that. And then on the other side, noticing signs of discomfort. Oh, maybe you've gone too far. Or maybe they're just not so sure about what they're talking about and you need to find someone else. And then you end it with more pre-selected questions because that's the idea behind elicitation is they forget the muddle in the middle, all this stuff that you're really looking for, they remember the questions at the end. And they're friendly questions, you know. You want to leave them feeling good about themselves and that they've had a nice conversation with you and they have a good memory of you. So that's it in a nutshell.
The other thing that is the most important thing to remember is that this is all about the ethical gathering of competitive intelligence. And so you never misrepresent yourself. You are who you are to anyone you talk to, and therefore you are observing the ethical behavior that is the standard. So when it comes to elicitation, the most important thing, in my opinion, is planning. Whether you are going to a conference, whether you are having a phone conversation, whether you are doing a win-loss interview, it's what are your goals? What are your goals? And then you really think about what is it you're trying to get and how are you going to do that? And so before you actually have a conversation, you get grounded. And Ellen is going to talk a little bit more about those techniques, but you really mentally set your intention. You think about your motivation. You think about how you want to come across when you're talking with someone. And you want to make sure that you have a good understanding of really, again, why you're there. And then when it comes time to actually talking with someone and executing, first thing, as Ellen said, is you build rapport. Is it a sports team? Is it a university? Is it a common background of anything, a dog? Dogs are favorites. Everybody always loves to talk about their dogs. So you really build the rapport so that you can then start in with your conversation. You have to be flexible because sometimes things go in a different direction. So you have to be able to pivot at the way the conversation goes. You need to know when to probe and when to back away a little bit. And you're always going to be friendly. As far as after the execution, after you've talked with someone, then it's a time for analysis. It's a time for thinking about, did I get the questions answered that I needed to? Did I do this right? Do I need to pivot when it comes to my style? Is this all I need? Or do I need to go back and ask some more questions? And then again, you reflect on that and you go back and start your planning all over again.
Very good. And I really think one of the things important about this whole process, this is the conversation process that I've developed. And what's in bold here is what's different when you're doing elicitation, when you're using elicitation techniques, kind of how to fit them in. The other thing I always like to remember, and thank you, Laurie, for remembering about the ethics. I had forgotten to mention that. It's so important. The other thing I like to get to is treat them, the other person, the way they'd like to be treated. You want to figure that out as quick as you can when you're talking to somebody.
So back to the planning, again, the most important thing, your goals, what questions. We call, in the defense world, you call it key intelligence topics before you go to a conference. You're trying to determine exactly who you want to talk to and what you want to talk to them about. You want to talk about how to think about how do you motivate someone to actually share information. And that's all about your style and their style and matching, mirroring and matching things that they're doing. You want to think about how you're going to introduce yourself. I've found it at some conferences, if I go up and with flattery, talk about contracts people have won and how impressive they're doing, they're much more willing to have a conversation with me. Sometimes I've gone up and just introduced myself as a competitive intelligence professional. I'd like to talk to them about what they're doing in the competitive intelligence world. You always have to just kind of gear the kind of conversation you're going to have. The other thing that's very, very important is you often need to share something in order to get something. So you think about in advance, what do you know that's not proprietary, but that might be an interesting, as my boss calls it, tiddly bit to share with someone to get them to open up with you.
Another thing I notice is I like to match their breathing. I try to think about that too, because if I match their breathing a lot of times and mimic them, I get an idea of how they're feeling, maybe, you know? Sounds a little touchy-feely, but it actually works. Advance, please. Why it's not it? Whoops. All right,
All right.
let's try being coordinated here. Not my strong point. So as Laurie was
Technology
going,
is not always our friend.
no, it's me. Warming up the interview. So Laurie's already touched on this. So I am going to just tell a fun story about this. It's my favorite one, and it's actually John from Aurora, WDC, and John Thompson, a wonderful researcher. He's a VP there, so you know he's the head of all the people doing the research. However, he has a story from way back when, where he was trying to figure out a common thing with the person he was going to talk to, and he figured out there was only really one person for him to talk to. And gosh, oh golly, he was a musician. So was John, and he had gone to the Berkeley School of Music. So John starts his interview out with, before we get going, I just have to know, what was it like to go to the College of Berkeley for music? You want to talk about a home run of an interview. They talked for about 10 minutes about Berkeley, and then the guy even said, "Okay, we're not here to talk about this." Anyway, that's what you call a home run. But the point is, find something. Then this is more in the planning phase again, back to the planning phase. Well, continuing the planning phase, a little more detail. You know, what profession are they in? Sometimes that's all I have to go by, right? They're an electrician. Well, what are the things about electricians? Danger. Maybe I can mention something about that. Politics. Well, these days that's pretty divisive to say the least. So let's just talk about politics at the firm that they're working at. Is if that is applicable, because you need to be sensitive to that. Absolutely, especially if you're setting up a CI process or getting a little deeper with these folks or setting up a win-loss program. Personal issues, you know, um, what are the sort of things that turn them on? You know, what are their hobbies? Are they sports fans? Are they Rotarian? You know, what sort of charities do they give to? How do they spend their free time? Personal, you know, their gender sort of things. Uh, you know, are they married? LGBTQ, you know, be sensitive to who they are because it matters these days. It always has. We're just more sensitive to it. What's their predisposition? That's kind of like the disc things. Are they dominant? Are they more introverted? Go into what they're like. What's their preferred communication style? Pick up on that quickly. Just to pick one of them because we don't have but so much time. The dominant type doesn't want to hear your stories. They want to dominate the conversation. So you have to be quite direct with them. And then we go all the way to the other end of the spectrum where someone's a micro, micro, micro. And so they're going to have a ton of questions for you. Be prepared to answer those questions, even though I'm about the opposite of a micro. And I'm like, I have to deal with it. I have to deal with it. And then emotional intelligence, you know, cue into who they are and also be aware of who you are and how you come across.
So the other thing that is extremely interesting when it comes to bonding with someone you want to talk to is trying to figure out what is unique about them. And so this is just an example of different uniqueness in characteristics and how people identify as, you know, they're questioning, they're people who are deeply analytical are going to be analyzing everything everything you ask. And so be aware of that. They're going to be people that have wonderful senses of humor. So you can appeal to their sense of humor. Just be aware of who you're talking to. Now, this is much more challenging when you are doing a remote interview because in person, you can read body language. You can see if somebody's standing with their arms crossed, which basically indicates they're really not all that interested and they may not even be listening to you, or if someone is very open to what you're saying. So it's a lot more challenging virtual, but you still can bond with people based on your planning.
The other thing just to remember is we often box people in based on their personality. Oh, they're this type of person. And then you find out, well, they are, but not totally. And so the uniqueness is something you want to have come through and let them think that. Let them realize that you're seeing them for who they are. So pre-execution still, preparing rather your introduction. These are things I like to think about. You know, what's in it for them to share? You know, where are they even going to be willing to share? Are they going to be suspicious about sharing? You know, thinking about that. And as Laurie had already said, what are you going to share? what about confidentiality? Like in a lot of these win-loss interviews that you do, that's important to them, and a lot of times they won't even have an interview with you. They won't set one up unless it's confidential. And then the ethical considerations, we as consultants are often asked to do things that are highly unethical, like going to a trade show and saying we work for another company, or even using another name. I've had more stuff thrown at me, and I'm like, no, 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 no. I go as Ellen Naylor, who I work for. The other thing is smiling. A lot of times we take ourselves too seriously, and we're really intent on getting what we're going to get, and we're intent on our introduction saying just the right words. Don't worry about that. It's going to work, especially if you don't take yourself too seriously and you get grounded. Whoops, here we go. No, whoops, there we go.
So this is the grounded. This is breathing, thinking about what you're going to do. Sometimes at a conference, I will go from one booth and then I will go outside and I'll stop and I'll think, I'll take some notes from my conversation. And then I'll just literally just sit there, kind of close my eyes and think about what am I going to do next? Think about my motivation, think about who I'm going to be talking to, thinking about how I need to relate to the next person I'm planning to talk to. And breathe. Breathe is really important. You don't have to talk nonstop when you're talking to someone. You take a time, take a breath, step back, do whatever you need to do to make you and the person you're talking to more comfortable.
So getting grounded. There's two methods that I have here to share with you, and in my book I have a bunch of other ones. I just think getting grounded it was such a game changer for me that I just had to throw it in. And I haven't really seen that in a lot of other books that talk about elicitation, right? But it is so important that you get grounded and with who you are and what you need to accomplish. And my favorite one, and it's quick to do at conferences, is the Amy Cuddy power pose. And I show the picture there, and I'll just show you by standing up. You're here, and your legs are shoulder length apart. You can't see my legs, and you're looking straight ahead, and you're getting grounded. Sometimes I'll even do it in front of a mirror because uh, there's something about looking into your own eyes and believing in yourself and realizing, I'm here to serve. I'm here to do what needs to be done. And then Dr. Weil, I love his 4-7-8 breathing technique. And we don't have time to do it here. We do it often in class, but we don't today. But I have given you a link to go watch it. But the idea behind it is you breathe in on the count of 4, you hold it in for 7, and then you breathe out loudly on 8, like that for 8. And you do that a few times. And Dr. Weil swears by it. I don't have the discipline to do it every day, and that's how you benefit the most. But it does help to do it even when you have a little chance before going out to an event. And
And
this one
again,
is,
yeah, go ahead, Ellen.
and then setting your intention. Of course, your major intention is what you're there for, right? Whatever information is you're hoping to get out from somebody, and a lot of times you just want to know what they're thinking, right? What's going on in their brain, the kind of thing that's not going to be on the internet or anywhere else. It's the sort of thing that isn't going to be out there. But I like to set an intention that is broader than that, because that also was a game changer for me, was just thinking about the universe. And I know this sounds very touchy-feely and physics and quantum physics and all that, but it actually is very effective. And that is, what is your intention overall? And my intention overall is for the person to feel better about themselves at the end of our conversation than when we said hello. Laurie, did you have something to add here?
No, I really like it when I walk away from a conversation and I remember something and I'm smiling. And I'm hoping that the person I've talked with also is smiling. So there are lots of things you can do and lots of things that you probably should not do when it comes to behavior and having a conversation. So when you're talking to someone, honesty is the best policy, truly. So you will convey interest, you will convey concern, you will convey curiosity. You want to tell someone about how talking with each other, there's a win-win situation in terms of sharing, and that you can have a difficult conversation without it causing any negative impact, shall we say. Going into a conversation, not being trustful, focusing on convincing someone, pretending to be listening. I mean, you have to listen during a conversation, and that's another one of our slides that we have, but it's really all about being honest and truthful with yourself, and that will be conveyed to whomever you're talking with.
And it's amazing how they open up when you're behaving that way. And it's amazing how they don't when you're pretending to listen, for example. Who can't tell when you're not really listening, you know? Okay, and then let's play around with knowing human nature. And this is why the techniques work. The elicitation techniques. People love to be recognized as long as it's for real. People love to show off for what it is they know, you know, where they're an expert. People are innately curious. People in CI more than most, but people are curious. It's just a human trait, and that's why they can't keep a secret, right? And people love to gossip and just talk about other people, maybe not even gossiping, but just talking about someone else. But gossiping is the next step, right? And people like to complain. Some people more than others. And if you notice you're talking to someone who really likes to complain, you can use complaining as a great elicitation technique. People can't help but correct you also, especially me. I'm a woman, and over the phone, I have kind of a young voice. So, you know, they can't help themselves. They'll correct me. And that's just how it goes. I look pretty old now, so they're less apt to do it in person in comparison to about 20 years ago. But there you go. People are defensive. You know, if you come out with something kind of provocative that they don't agree with, they're going to defend it, or, you know, it's one of their friends, or it's a practice they have, or it's a product, you know, where you're doing your digging. Emotional hazards, by that I mean when people get to be too emotional, right? Um, they're apt to really slip in and tell you a lot of things because you've opened up the box of emotion, which is just, it flows. It just flows out of people. We've already kind of touched on the secrets because of the curiosity and the gossip and the aw shucks thing. And by that, I mean, when you flatter somebody, and it's a for real thing, though, people can see right through flattery if you're phony about it. Um, Often enough, they'll just, aw shucks, it was really not a whole lot. And then they'll tell you what they did. And that's what you wanted to know, right? And insecurity, a lot of people are insecure. I think that's part of being a human being. We're all insecure one way or the other. And, you know, that's just how it is. And also, this is a little longer than it might be, but often enough, people find it easier to discuss something that really isn't their concern. You know, like engineers go to trade shows and they tell you everything because they think everybody else knows this and it's just not a big deal, you know. Or they'll talk about something that is a competitive offering because they don't really care about it because they're not competing in that space, but you are.
So when it comes to execution, actually having the conversation, we've already mentioned how to build rapport. When you're talking with someone, there are hints and cues that they either want to continue the conversation or they want to end it. Again, being flexible is very, very important. Being able to pivot in the middle of a conversation. You know, you can have a 5-minute conversation with someone and they're like, I'm really sorry, I have to leave, but let's have another conversation. Be able to say, hey, I certainly respect your time. Thank you very much. I'll come back. Let me know when. Listening is incredibly important. Visually, you want to see how they are reacting to you. So again, there's crossing their arms. There's a stiffness. I've noticed, I was on a video meeting where there were about 20 people, and anytime anyone talked, they went on video. But I noticed during a couple of the conversations that the people's body language, they got really, really stiff. And you could tell they were not liking whatever was being said. It's a whole lot easier to tell that when you're in person, but you can tell on a video. And then as you're talking with someone, your brain is working and thinking about what they're telling you. And do you need to pull a thread? Do you need to turn a corner? Are they giving you enough? Do you need to stop? And then always end on a positive note. Always end on a positive note. Hand over a business card, say, let's have another conversation. Thank you so much. I really appreciated your time. Always make it so that they know you're done, you know you're done, but you're walking away and it's a good experience.
So cool about all this today is almost every call you see the person from the shoulders on up. And like you said, sometimes you see the whole conference room, which is a whole lot of fun because they're just seeing you from the shoulders on up. Most amusing.
And then building rapport, we've already talked about all of it. I'm trying to think if there's anything new. Really, it's all about, I think one of the big things is understanding if they're introverted or extroverted. You can tell by how comfortable they seem to be in talking with you. If somebody's standing there kind of shifting around a little bit, you can tell that there's a little bit of discomfort and you need to figure out kind of what's going on. Again, as this picture shows, the mirroring and matching, I learned this a long time ago. If somebody's standing there with their arms crossed, maybe you cross your arms. If someone's, kind of leaning to the right, you lean to the right, because when you match styles, there's kind of an unconscious ability to put people at ease.
The other thing I'd like to add to this is sometimes people have an accent and you have a hard time understanding them, or you notice they might be deaf. So you need to slow down your speech and be sensitive to that, but you didn't know that before you spoke to them. So that's another observation I try to be sensitive to when I'm having these calls. And I slow down my speech if I notice, gee, they don't really speak English very well. Let's honor that. Let's respect that. Make sure they're understanding me too. Okay, flexibility. We've already touched on it probably 3 times, and any of these things can be the case, unexpectedly stressed. I had one of those in a call where the guy had a very bad day that I was talking to, but I had no idea what that had been the case. And every time he'd finish talking, he'd press the mute button and press it as though he was hanging up the phone and slamming it down. And I thought, dear God. And he had nothing good to say about the people who had hired me to do this job. And it was a strategic initiative where we were trying to learn how they were using all the products. Was this the right mix? What would they recommend into the future? This sort of thing. And I was starting to write all this up, and I realized it was a lovely day to go out for a ski that evening with my husband before it got dark. And I came back, and when I came back, I had an email from this guy, and he told me he'd had a very bad review that day from on high and also for the people reporting to him. And he actually told me what had happened. And, he had very good things. So you never know. And at trade shows, I think that's probably where I've had to show flexibility the most. And Laurie too. You just never know. I think my worst story that really caused me to sweat was at a show when I walked up to the booth. It was the Neocon, up to the key competitor's booth, and found that they wouldn't let me in. She said, "Oh, do you have an appointment?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm here to see your stuff, your showroom. You have to have an appointment." And so I thought, well, what the hell? I've got to do this. So I ran around the corner to where she couldn't see me and thought maybe I can just go in with somebody else. And a major computer provider, who is probably her largest customer, came up and I asked if I could join them. Long story short, I really learned a lot. They had a lot more questions that I would never have thought of. And it was kind of amusing that she was their account executive and she had to be nice to me. Anyway, you just never know about these things.
So listening, and I think this is unfortunately a dying art. First thing is you've got to know who you got to know yourself, and you got to know, are you a good listener? I know in some cases for me, I interrupt because I'm afraid I'm going to forget a point I want to make unless I make it. So a really good thing to do is talk to people who work with you, talk to people who know you, and ask them how good of a listener they think you are. Ask them what you do well, ask them what you could improve, ask them what stands out. Those are important. It's important feedback to get because it's very hard to be self-aware of yourself. And again, people fake listening and they think they get away with it, but they don't. They don't. You absolutely can tell. They're not rolling their eyes. Their eyes aren't necessarily glazed, but you can tell that they're just not at listening to anything you're saying.
And even sometimes when people are nodding continuously like this, I think, are they
They're not
really
listening.
listening?
Yeah.
If they nod once here or there, okay, they probably are. And yeah, so listening is a big deal. And you think much faster than you speak. And that's part of why listening is such a challenge, I think. Your brain goes at such a faster pace. So you need to be thinking about, why did they say this way? What do they mean by this? Gee, I thought this would have been the answer they come up with. So if you get your brain thinking like that, that helps you be a better listener too. And rather than thinking about what you're going to say next. And another trick, Lori, I use sometimes, that is when we're in a situation where it's a virtual call, I have a little sticky or a piece of paper and I write one word down to remind me to bring up whatever it is that I know I'm going to forget. And that helps too.
I can also give you another example. When I was at a defense company, um, and I participated in the win-loss program, we had a group that would go to a debrief with a customer, and I was invited to go because they were all so biased that they wanted an unbiased person to go to the meeting and actually hear what the customer was saying. Well, I went to several meetings where they had lost competitions, and the customer repeatedly told them, "You're not giving me what I want." So I would go back to them and I would say, "Okay, guys, whatever you're bidding, you're not listening to what the customer is asking for because they're not giving you, you're doing what you want to give them. You're not giving them what they want." And that was a really interesting thing for me because I would have thought that they would have been aware of what the customer wanted. But in some cases, they probably were, but they just had an agenda, and the agenda was to sell what they wanted to sell.
Might have had something to do with how they get paid too. Just saying,
True,
having been in
true.
sales for a few years, it's a pretty shameless profession sometimes. Uh, oops. Okay, so encouraging to share visually. These are just a few positions you get in. One is you see that lady leaning forward. Leaning forward is a sign of friendliness. I'm interested, I'm listening, I'm following you. So that's a good one for you to do. And Laurie also mentioned the mimicking and even mimicking their breath. I think people were more sensitive to that. And every now and again, we're still on a call, where we don't see the person. I notice they're breathing more when I'm on a call and I don't see them because I can hear their voice better a lot of times, or hear their breathing, I'm sorry, and I can be more aware of it. Another one is the leaning forward and off to the side in the chair. And as Lori was saying, you lean the same way, you know, very subconsciously, makes them feel more comfortable. And then the bottom left is the woman, she's being thoughtful. And that's a sign of respect. And it's also a sign that you're getting through and they're getting through because she's being thoughtful and thinking about what's next and how to communicate better. And the other one is just kind of a friendly one. You got your hands. How do you use your hands when you're conversing, in fact? Some people don't use their hands much at all. Other people, man, they're all over the place. The Italians, right? Um, and then the last one is the arms crossed. Now, sometimes you have your arms crossed, but I'm cold. So be aware of that, and also be aware of the fact some people cross their arms a lot just because they do. It's a habit. I have a brother who does that all the time, and it's just what he does. He even walks like that. He walks with his arms crossed. Like, so being aware of these kinds of things is so helpful. And we don't have time to go into it, but there's a lot of positions that you can be aware of when somebody is uncomfortable. And it's time to change gears, the expressions
The
in their
thing that
face.
Sorry, the other thing that I think is interesting and important to emphasize and it may seem really, really obvious, but respect, we all live on our cell phones. And you don't realize in the middle of a conversation that you're actually picking up your cell phone and looking at your cell phone as you're talking to someone. And so, the rule is if your phone rings in your pocket while you're talking to someone, don't answer it. But my other rule is if somebody else's phone rings while they're talking to me, I want them to feel comfortable. And I say, hey, don't worry about it. I'll step away so you can answer your call. It might be important. That's showing a sign of respect. And I mean, I go into restaurants and I don't see people talking to each other anymore. I see everybody at every table on their phone the whole time. And again, when you're talking with someone, you show the respect, you give them your 100% attention.
So true. Very good points, Laurie. Multitasking is not respectful.
So Ellen, we got a question from Rich. Oh, I cannot pronounce his last name. Mignonia.
Oh,
sorry, Rich.
Rich Mignonia. Mignonia.
Okay.
Yeah, he's here
He
in
says
Golden, Colorado.
AI seems to be a big thing these days. Have you thought about how to incorporate that into your elicitation?
Absolutely. Well, we could have a whole big conversation about that, Rich, but in a nutshell, I like to use AI to find the right people, to learn more about them. It's so much faster than any other way to do it. And also, you can organize what it is you find, in win-loss interviews so I don't use it to replace elicitation. I use it to enhance the information I can get about the people ahead of time, the situation, the market. I mean, it's just so efficient, so fast. I don't waste a lot of time. I also find that the AI stuff a lot of times is more timely than what I could find on Google. Google often publishes stuff or they just share stuff. The article might be outdated, but there's no date on it. I've noticed a lot of times when I use AI, the stuff is more up to date if it's sort of market material. But then, like anything else, I have to make sure that it's accurate and not hallucinating on me. So, but yeah, I think AI is here to stay. And I think as intelligence professionals, we need to use it.
Another question we have you ever done an interview where you were asked a regular question and you were completely floored by the answer?
Where I asked a regular question, and oh yeah, happens all the time, especially in like a win-loss thing. And floored maybe isn't quite the right idea, but surprised. I was told in this win-loss situation, the person who won the bid was their key competitor, and it turned out the key competitor was knocked out, and my customer wasn't even a finalist, which they thought they were. And another competitor won the business who they didn't even know was competing. And the reason they won the business is because the software that was being sold was a pricing software, and they already had a nice inventory management software from this other vendor. So it was like, oh my goodness. I asked more about that competitor because the company knew about this competitor, but they didn't even know they were in the competition. So we get those kinds of answers in win-loss sometimes, where you kind of have to just go back and say, whoa. I know another time I was doing an interview with those people using digital multimeter devices, and I was supposed to be talking to engineers and how do you use it? Very straightforward, right? Well, this guy turns out he repairs them. And I'm like, oh, let's change gears here. Which ones do you repair the most? Why? What's the quality of the products? So I had a whole new set of questions that I just came up with on the fly. And it turned out to be a very valuable amount of information he shared with me. So you have to be flexible and you have to go with the flow and take advantage of it and enjoy it. You just don't take yourself too seriously, right, Laurie?
Oh, yeah. So I've got another one. I'll take this one. What do you do if you suspect you've been told something confidential? So there's two ways to handle that, in my opinion. Number one is you say that's interesting and change the subject. If you want to probe a bit, you can say that's interesting. I've not heard that. Where did you hear that? But again, it's being very, very sensitive of ethics. And if somebody tells you something that is absolutely, is confidential, I just change the topic completely. And then we've got another question, Anne, from Ann Sigsby, Ellen, do you find virtual backgrounds are off-putting in an online elicitation engagement? Is it interpreted as possibly concealing, or is it simply accepted?
Virtual background, like you don't see the background of the person you're talking to. They just put in a blurry one,
Like
like what
mine,
Lori's doing.
like my blur. Yeah, like my blur. Yeah.
Personally, I couldn't care less. I'm there to know the person. I don't care about their background. The background might give me something to talk about if there's something interesting in the background, though. But on the other hand, I'm there to have a conversation. So I don't think about them trying to hide something. I want to know what's in their brain, what they're willing to share with me and their surroundings, but that doesn't affect it to me. What about you, Lori?
So during COVID, everything was virtual, and I really enjoyed getting to know people personally by seeing their home and seeing like Ellen's books behind her, seeing a little kid run across the screen or a dog or something. So I really enjoyed that. But I completely understand why people want to just keep, like right now, I'm in my kitchen. I don't really want you to see my kitchen. Um, I'm not hiding anything about me, just my kitchen. So I think I'm happy either way, frankly. And there's a couple of more questions. Ellen, Brett Norgard said, many orgs claim they do win-loss by talking to their salespeople post-deal. Please comment.
Well, you get one story for sure. You find out why they think they won or lost the deal. And I often like to talk to them before I do the win-loss interview, if especially if it's a big deal and we had surprises and all that. But if that's all you're going to do, you are going to get a biased answer. And a lot of times, especially for losses, their ego is bruised or whatever. And but it's better than getting no intelligence at all. And so I don't discourage it either. But you do have the bias, the typical bias of price versus relationship and all that kind of good stuff. Price if we lost, relationship if we won, that's a generality, I know. But relationships really do count for an awful lot. But it's good to go talk to the customer and learn about what is in their mind. And a lot of times it's kind of different than when sales thought it was, you know. And other times it matches it beautifully. It really depends on the sales channel. But I think that's just step one, a good step to do. What do you think, Lori?
I agree with that. I really think getting their perspective gives you at least a baseline, and then you can go out and figure out what really happened. So
Only
Claudia has an interesting comment. She said, I hear new folks saying they have lots of fears about making calls. They're nervous. Can you provide a quick get ready set of ways to be ready to pick up the phone and start? And I'll take this one because I do it all the time. I make cold calls. So doing business development, I'm making cold calls. I'm talking to clients who don't even know who the heck I am. I have found tremendous success when I lead with humor. So when I call someone and introduce myself, I say, I want to assure you that I'm a real person. I'm not a bot. You didn't win a cruise, and I'm not the IRS suing you. And normally what happens is if they kind of chuckle, they will continue to talk to me. Of course, there are people that's interested, click. But if you lead with humor and you be prepared that you're going to get a whole lot more not interested, then you can continue having the conversation. But that has worked really well for me. Ellen, how about you?
Well, I'll add to that in terms of I like to get grounded. I know when I first started in
Ellen,
making,
lean forward. There you go.
okay.
There
When
we
I
go.
first started, I was very fixated with the right words to say and how to introduce myself, and I'd be shaking like a leaf, to your point, Claudia. I was that way for a good 10 years. And what works for me is getting grounded before I make those calls. Just getting grounded with my intention. And I don't use humor as much as Lori does, but I like that. I might adopt that. I like how you say that. That's great. A lot of times I'll tell them why I'm calling them, and you're an expert or whatever it is, whatever I've dug up. But I'm not doing business development, so I'm in a different place too. So you need to think why it is they want to talk to you. What's in it for them? Any other questions?
I think we're good right now.
All right. Okay. Well, there's a lot about 40 elicitation techniques, and some of them are the body, like what we just went into on this slide. They're not all words, and that's something to keep in mind. A lot of people go, "Oh yeah, 40 of them. Tell me them all." No, the body, the action, the breathing. There's so many ways to elicit, and so we're just going to touch on a few of these now, but there's a lot of the word ones too. And the top left one is, someone telling a secret. I've never told anybody this before, or gee, I've never heard anybody discuss this before, that kind of thing. Works like a charm, especially at trade shows. And the middle one is my very favorite one, isn't it, Laurie? Silence.
Mhm.
Silence is respect. If you give people a chance to think about what they want to talk about, what's in their mind, give them time, especially if they're an introvert. If they're an extrovert, a lot of times they don't want to be silent anyway. They want to keep talking. So you want to be silent, right? It's all the more important to be silent. And then the top right one is naivety. You know, you don't want to come across as stupid like Dumbo the clown, but you do want to come across as needing the information. They're the expert, but you've done enough homework that you know enough to appreciate what they know and to also understand what they're going to tell you. Or if you don't quite understand it, you can probe and learn more. But you want to come across as somewhat knowledgeable for sure, but not as knowledgeable as they are. The point being, the bottom
So I
left.
have an example
Oh,
of
go
that
ahead.
one.
Yeah.
I was recently at a conference with one of my younger analysts, and he came up to me and he said, I need to get this answer. Can you help me? So, as a mature woman and not a technical person, I went up to the booth and they were showing one of their products, and I started admiring it and asking very, very almost dumb questions. But the bottom line we were trying to find out is if it had been, whatever the product was, if it actually had been flown. And so I'm asking about, is this similar to other products? Is it bigger? Is it smaller? Is it unique? And then I just kind of slipped in. So how has it been tested? And the guy was like, oh yeah, it's been tested at least 5 or 6 times. That was the answer we wanted. And it was just by being honest, because I'm not a technical person. Women do have an advantage. I will tell you, at conferences, I have found men love, especially engineers, love to talk to women, and they love to educate us. And I know that sounds sexist, but that's just how it's been.
Absolutely. Great story. Provocative, coming up with a provocative statement that challenges a person is a fun one, at trade shows. Lori, do you have a story about that one too, or no?
Yeah,
I
I had a
figured you did.
colleague. I had a colleague years and years ago who went up to a four-star general and told him he missed a meeting with her. And the general was like, well, young lady, I'm so sorry. And his little minder was frantically looking on and say, sir, you didn't miss a meeting. Sir, you don't have a meeting. And the general was talking to her saying, I'm really sorry. And the guy's like, you didn't miss the meeting. And there are all these people surrounding this group. And I was standing there literally wanting to die. And the general turned to my colleague and he said, little lady, let's get you on the schedule. Now that's what I would call provocative.
And also successful because she probably was trying to
Yes.
get it with him, right? Very
Yes.
clever.
Yes. I don't recommend that actually, but it worked for her.
I wouldn't have the nerve to do that either, Lori. No.
No, nor would I.
The middle one is the disbelief. The woman with the, are you kidding me? I can't believe this. At trade shows, that's a great, once again, a great show, or even in a win-loss call. Sometimes I've called someone up and they've won the deal, right? But they're talking about the competitor in a very positive way. And I'll just say, gee, I can't believe you selected our company. You're saying all this good stuff about competitor B. And they don't even realize they've done that. And they get defensive. And then they tell me more stuff about our company as well, why they actually chose us. But it is interesting how human nature works that way. When you register disbelief, often enough, the floodgates open because it's challenging another person's beliefs or what they think they did or what they think, how they come across. And then the last one is telling little lies, like Pinocchio. And a lot of people really think that's unethical, and I don't think so at all. And I'll tell you why. This is how I use it, I should say. I will, if I suspect someone isn't the knowledgeable person I was told they were, I will say something on purpose that's false to see if they correct me. And if they don't correct me, then probably I'm right. They really weren't the source I thought they were going to be. That's how I use it.
So Anne also said Drucker's invitation to please assume I know nothing can also be a very productive approach.
And there's a whole bunch more of these, coming up with a statement that assumes a presumptuous statement that assumes you know something that you don't really know, but you're hoping they're going to tell you. That's one of my favorite ones, but we're going to run out of time, so we'll go to the next slide here, Laurie, if I can make it go. There we go.
So the other thing is after you've had your conversation, you're really thinking, did I get what I needed to get? Is it relevant? Is it complete? Do I believe it? And when you get back to whatever to your team or your win-loss report or conference report, then the most important thing is to share what you learned. And if you're not sure about something, make sure you say, hey, I heard this, I found it interesting, but I'm not sure because I only got it from one person. Make sure they understand the sourcing of what you're coming back with.
Take your report and go for it and think that's it, so you need to give them the shades of gray. Yeah. Well, that's concluding our comments. So I'm giving a shameless plug for my book if you want to learn a lot more about elicitation. This is what we gave you today is the tip. Oh my goodness, the tip of the iceberg. So we have it in paperback as well as the Kindle Unlimited. I decided to go that way because if people look at it and don't want to read it, then they don't have to read it, rather than buying the book. And if you want to review it, I have a link there for that. We have a couple of reviews so far because I didn't ask anybody for reviews. I thought I'd give people a month or two to read it for one thing. And the Audible version probably will come in September. Thank you to the Aurora WDC brothers, the Joe Bros, for telling me about a voice coach. Makes all the difference in the world. And I start the recording with the studio on August 7th.
So I've got one more question from Jean-Francois Pelly. What tools do you use to establish constants in the interviews, analysis tools, especially when the number of interviews is important and you're doing a lot of them? That would be a good one for you, Ellen, for win-loss.
I usually don't do that many. I keep it down to maybe 20 or so. And the reason I do, so I don't need, well, the thing that's the most important for me or the most efficient for me is what are the trends I'm noticing in my win-loss interviews? And you can use AI to do that, any number of tools to go at the trends. But as a human being, I also look at them and decide, okay, what looks like it's the most important thing I'm really noticing here? So I can train the AI to go after that too. So I do a lot of that. I know there's a lot of other tools out there that people use to create a dashboard and beautiful charts and download whatever you want and include phone calls that you have with different software in addition to the win-loss interviews. There's so much technology out there, but I don't feel like I'm a real expert to address that because I'm not invested in it. But there's a lot of consulting firms out there that are, that I'm basically a one-person shop these days because I'm that age. I'll say no more.
So this is a really good list of resources for people who read books or listen to books or have Kindles. It's just a really good list of resources when you're thinking about elicitation and learning more about elicitation. And of course, Ellen's book's one of the top books. I was honored to endorse it. Very excited about that. But there's a lot of people that have written a lot of good stuff, and particularly the Conference and Trade Show Intelligence is really a guide by Jonathan and Bonnie. May she rest in peace. So I think it's a good list to have.
Yeah, we're done. And, are there more questions? We're not quite at time, so we have time for a couple more if there are some, Lori. And
Let me look.
I'll
No,
stop
I
the show.
think, so yes, Brett, we will be sending out the slides and we will be sharing the recording as well. The other thing is CI Fellows does this once a month. I don't know what the topic is going to be for August, but stay tuned for the notice of the next webinar. We really are trying to help educate and enlighten people. And so you'll get a survey after this as well. Please share any thoughts and ideas you might have for future webinars, topics of interest, and we'll try to help you out.
Also, we're going to post on LinkedIn a link to this presentation so you can just look at it again later. Or you can tell your friends about it who weren't able to attend. Because this is July, so I imagine quite a few people are on vacation,
Vacation.
Yeah. So thanks, everyone. If there are no more questions.
Have a great day or night or morning.